Hey, this is Antonio. Welcome back to my channel. Now, who's ready for some fighting words? In this video, I want to do a breakdown and prediction for Tony Harrison versus Tim Tszyu. So we all know the news about Charlo. He's not going to be able to fight Tim Tszyu. However, Tony Harrison, super bad, said, you know what? I'll step up and fight him. It's a strategic move. Of course, you'll step up and fight him because if you beat him, then you actually get to go in the ring with Charlo again. You make a strong claim for that, since Tim Tszyu was the next guy up to bat. And if you knock him out, you knock him off, well then yeah, you're up to bat all over again. And it's very rare that you would see somebody like Tony Harrison bat again. And I wouldn't mind that, to be totally honest with you, because I think Tony Harrison and Jermell Charlo was some of the best commentary we've had in years. So I'm not mad at that. But who knows? Let's see how things are going to plan out in this breakdown and prediction. Really quick, if you like the videos, please subscribe to the channel. And there are many of you who have, and I want to say thank you. And I truly am happy for you joining the Fighting Words family. If you have not subscribed, please do so right now. It only takes a click. Also, if you could, while you're doing that, hit that thumbs up button. It really does help and support this channel. Now let's jump into this. Basically, I'll just put both guys side by side, and I'll list a list of attributes, and I'll either credit it to one guy or the other. That's basically how it goes. And whoever has more in the end, that's the individual that I'm going with. So we'll start with resume. By far, I would say Tony Harrison has the better resume. And you'll say, why? Well, because he has a win over the undisputed champ. That's why. He has a win over Jermell Charlo. That alone gives him the better resume alone, and nobody should dispute that. IQ, I would have to say Tony Harrison again. Again, he has a win over over Charlo. That's saying something. He also fought Sergio Garcia, and he's no walk in the park. He's no walk in the park at all. I mean, there were a lot of moments in that fight where it looked like Tony Harrison was not going to win that. But he used some smarts, and he used his ring IQ, and that's honestly what saved him, because he got caught in a lot of pockets. But his ring IQ is what I would say credited him that fight. And Sergey Rashenko, I know I pretty much murdered that name. Listen, if you're new to Fighting Words, I have a very high respect for Eastern European fighters, period. They are no walk in the park. You're talking about guys who've had hundreds of fights, okay? And their definition of amateur fights are professional fights anywhere else in the world. So, because they're fighting professional level individuals anywhere else in the world. So, yeah, just by beating him is a high ring IQ. Any and all of these Eastern European guys have high ring IQs. They don't get the credit they deserve because we're in America. But on this channel, if you deserve the credit, you're going to get the credit. And I'm sorry, if you got a win like that on your belt, you got some high ring IQ. Power. This is a draw. It's equal. I mean, Tony Harrison has 21 KOs and Tim Tszyu has 15 KOs. So it's equal. There's nothing to really dispute about that. That's equal. Power is equal. Speed, I got to give it to Tony Harrison because that's actually part of his game. Tony Harrison is all about movement. He's all about movement. If he has a pressure fighter like Tim Tszyu, like Charlo, you know, he has to move. He can't sit still. And Tony Harrison is a true student of the game. He can actually have an entire fight backing up. He's done it. He did it with Charlo. He had an entire prize fight backing up. That's impressive. He actually won that first fight backing up. I'm not one of the guys who subscribes to him winning. I was more leaning toward a draw, but a win's a win. And listen, they credited to him. He got the belts. It's all good. Water under the table. They had a rematch. He lost. Footwork. Again, Tony Harrison. He has to, again, that's a part of his game. He has to. He has to have the speed. He has to have footwork because that's a part of his game. Tony Harrison can crack. Tony Harrison is no walk in the park. Tony Harrison is not a guy you want to stand in front of, but he's a pure boxer. He's not a brawler. Tony Harrison will only brawl if he has to get out of a situation. And I appreciate that about him because he understands himself. There's a lot of guys who are delusional in thinking they are brawlers when they're not brawlers. And then you have a guy like Tony Harrison that says, you know what, my bread and butter is boxing, and I'm not going to fray from that just because I'm hot in this moment, or I'm a little angry in this moment. No, I'm going to stay composed, and that's one thing I definitely can credit Tony Harrison. Even when he got knocked down the first time, well, a couple times from Charlo, he didn't get up trying to fight wild or anything like that. He got up and he got up quite composed. That's one thing I would give Tony Harrison. Even when he's down, he can recover quite quickly. Heart. So initially I was going to give this a draw as well because both guys have been down. However, and hear me out because it's important, I'm giving it to Tony Harrison because he was down fighting tougher opposition. Charlo is tougher than any guy Tim Tszyu's ever fought. Period. And he went down from Charlo and got back up. That's something that I got to credit him with the heart. So initially it was going to be a draw, but no, you got to go with Tony Harrison. We got to be fair. We got to be honest. You got put down by the champ, and the champ is a knockout artist. You got put down by the champ several times, and you got back up. We gotta respect him for that, and we have to give him this nod. Body work. Tim Tszyu all day. Tim Tszyu will go to that body. Tim Tszyu is a master chef when it comes to the liver shot. Like, he is a master chef. If there's one thing he can do, it's a shovel hook and it's a liver shot. And he's perfected the art and the craft, and he's great at it. He's great at the setup. He's great at the execution. And he's just a great body puncher. And when he goes to the body, he almost always finds success. Very seldom has he ever thrown a sloppy body punch. I've never really seen it, to be honest with you. So, hands down, Tim Tszyu. Arsenal. I feel like Tony Harrison has more weapons, and I think also that's because of the way he fights. If you fight backing up, you can't just be throwing straight punches or hooks. No, you have to throw a lot of stuff if you're going to fight backing up. You're going to be forced to throw a lot of stuff if you're fighting backing up. A lot of times he fights backing up. And Tony Harrison has this thing where he's more like a matador, and he kind of tames aggressive fighters. And in order to do that as well, you have to pick off shots as they're coming in and know when to block, know when to pick off, know when to counter, and all those things. And if you're doing all those things and still being offensive, you can't just use straight punches. You can't just use hooks. You have to use shovel hooks. You have to use check hooks, especially check hooks, because at some point you're going to have to angle off. And he does that quite well. So I have to give it to Tony Harrison for the Arsenal. Defense. Again, because he's not that aggressive. Listen, for the most part, I like Tim Tszyu. I really do. But for the most part, he's fought a lot of guys who just weren't necessarily on his level, to be honest with you. Not bad guys, but just he's so much above the people in his country that he was fighting that it's hard to give him a lot of these credits because he hasn't really fought the top of the top of the top. Tony Harrison's been in there with some tough guys. And again, the Sergio Garcia, Sergey Rashenko. I am really murdering that name. I do apologize. But you can't get in there with a guy from Eastern Europe and lollygag or just play around. No, you're going to have to work. And trust me, if a guy from Eastern Europe is in the ring with you, if for nothing else, you're going to have to work your defense because those guys are conditioned to throw a lot of punches. And because of that, I have to give it to Tony Harrison. Now, I'm going to switch into a category that I like to call, what does he do well? So I'm going to start with Tim Tszyu. What does he do well? Applying pressure. There's going to be no rest for any of Tim Tszyu's opponents, period. He's in your face. He's walking you down. He's pressing you. You're never going to have a moment of rest. Either his pressure, you can succumb to that, or you can succumb to the punches, or you can succumb to both of them. But he'll make you work. Even if it's just backing away, he's going to make you work. And he's great at that. He's a great stalker, and he doesn't exert a lot of energy while doing it. What does he do well? What does Tony do well? Lead guys into traps, fighting on the back foot. That's what he does well. He did it well with Charlo. Charlo got popped a few times just because he got led into something while he thought he was backing Tony off, not realize he was being drawn in by Tony, and he's really good at that. And the thing is, Tim Tszyu is a pressure guy, so he's right up the alley for Tony Harrison. What does he do? Let's see. What does he do well? What does Tim Tszyu do well? Beautifully timed uppercuts. Tim Tszyu has one of the most amazing uppercuts. I mean, it's clean, it's sharp, and it's fluid. One thing about the uppercut is you'll see guys put way too much into it. Like they'll just, a lot of guys will be up close and they don't have the right leverage, and they'll put way too much into that uppercut. Because I have no idea why they do it, but sometimes guys just make the uppercut more mechanical than what it really needs to be. And there's two guys in particular who I love, well, actually three guys that I love their uppercuts. Jermall Charlo, the bigger of the two, twins. Gervonta Tank Davis, who understands the complete body because he'll twist everything, and he's bringing all of that 130 pounds into that shot as he's driving upward. And then you have Tim Tszyu, who could literally be standing upright and then, perfectly timed, crisp, and fluid. Like you'll never see it coming because he just kind of pops it. It's just a pop, and it's just almost like a jerk, but it's perfect. It's not a shovel hook because it's tighter than that, but it's perfect. It's always beautifully timed. And yeah, that's something he does really, really well. And it's an amazing weapon. He doesn't use it as much as he should because he's amazing with it, and he's always flush with it. Let's see. What does Tony do well? Controlling heavy hitters, making them chase him. And I've kind of alluded to this earlier, but when I look at this fight, I just see, I can see Tim being walked into something. I can see him being walked into a shot. I can see Tim going down, actually, because he just walks into something, thinking that he's got Tony on the back foot, thinking that he's got Tony under pressure, thinking that maybe even has Tony hurt, and then he winds up getting caught with something. It happened with Charlo, and then Tony started dancing in the ring, and that was kind of like the writing on the wall for Tony to go. And Charlo shortly after put him away. What does Tim do well? Posting guys up and landing clean. So what do I mean by posting guys up? Tim Tszyu knows how to keep a guy steady, and he'll post you up, and then before you know it, that hand is there. Before you know it. But he will literally just post you up, line you up, and fire off. And he's extremely good at this. That is a technique that he has perfected. I don't think Tim Tszyu has a lot of weapons, but the weapons that he has, they are crisp. Again, Tim Tszyu does not throw a lot of punches. And credit to him, because he doesn't waste a lot of punches. And he still has energy preserved in the end of the fight to continue fighting if he has to, like if it has to get dirty. He has energy for that. He has the preserves for that. But the way he fights is so clean and it's so intelligent. It's simplistic, but it gets the job done. Now I'm going into another segment. What worries me about this guy, or this guy leading into the fight? What worries me, let's see, is the pace for Tony. So Tony Harrison doesn't have a fast pace. He doesn't. He just kind of edges back. Just enough so he can keep a jabbing distance. And, he'll work out that jab, but he uses a peppering jab, just something to keep you occupied with. But the main thing about that is he's taking small little steps back. And that worries me because, again, I just said it. Tim Tszyu does not waste a whole lot of energy. Tim Tszyu is not going to throw a lot of punches anyway. Tim Tszyu is not going to throw 40 punches in a round. So if you work even less against him, that's great and up his alley. And that could be detrimental to Tony Harrison. Let's see. The slow pace, and I mentioned the slow pace, it's only going to benefit Tim Tszyu. I think Tony Harrison needs to big up the pace. I think he needs to start right off the bat because, again, he's not fast on his feet. Tim isn't fast to the draw, and Tim is not going to meet you in terms of, he's not going to match you in terms of punch output. He's not going to do that. So I think Tony Harrison should start fast, but I don't think he will. That's not his style. Let's see. Tim is undefeated and his mental is unbroken. That's a problem. Let's see. I'm going to go into that. So let's see. Okay, so one, Tim Tszyu is undefeated. So he has no reason or doubt in his mind that he will not remain, that he's going to leave that fight undefeated, okay? Because he hasn't lost before. So he should have no reserves of, what if I lose this fight? He doesn't have to worry about that because he's never been faced with that before. So that's number one. Number two, Tim Tszyu is in the shadow of his father. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is when it comes to boxing and fathers and sons. He desperately wants to get out of that shadow. Okay. Number three, he has an equalizer. He knows that he hits hard. He knows that he can just hit you one time, he can go away. That's a lot mentally going in the box of confidence for Tim Tszyu. And that's a problem for Tony Harrison because Tony Harrison's been knocked out. So that's a problem for him. Okay, that's a problem for him. That's a problem. And we have to acknowledge that. However, on the flip hand side, Tim Tszyu has never fought anybody on Tony Harrison's level. Let's just call a spade a spade. He just made his way over to America. He's never fought anybody on this level. Tony Harrison beat the champ, the unified champ. He beat that guy, Jermell Charlo. So he has greatly stepped up in competition. So let's not forget that. So Tony Harrison has that in his mental. You don't belong in this on this playing level. You don't belong up here. And it's my responsibility to put you back in your place. Send you packing. So that's Tony Harrison. So this is what worries me. Tony Harrison gets hit. Okay? Tony Harrison gets hit. And for two reasons. One, Tony Harrison, if he finds himself on the ropes, he's actually really easy to find. And that's a problem. The other thing is Tony Harrison slows down as the fight goes on. He doesn't speed up. Some people get more energy as the fight goes on. Not Tony Harrison. Even though he doesn't have a fast pace, he does tend to slow down. Again, that's a problem for Tony Harrison, and that's a thumbs up for Tim Tszyu. So if he can stay away from those ropes, and that's a big if because he tends to find himself there. Sergio Garcia had him on those ropes, and he did some damage. That's where he did his most devastating damage in their fight. And I'm looking at what Sergio Garcia did. I'm like, yeah, but if that was Tim Tszyu, the way he punches, you might not have made it out of that fight. Let's just put it like that. Now, I'm coming to an end. Listen, on paper, there is no reason why Tony Harrison cannot beat Tim Tszyu. Tony Harrison has fought much better competition. Whether you like it or not, it's the truth. And you should not be able to dispute, you can't dispute that. Tony Harrison beat the champ, so you can't dispute that. He's fought better competition. He has a much higher boxing IQ. You got to give him that. On top of that, Tony Harrison is a boxing coach to the current female champion, Alicia Baumgartner. So he knows what he's doing. I mean, he got her a championship. He knows what he's doing. Up here, he knows what he's doing, and he knows what he's doing with these. Let's see. I just said that he beat the unified champ. Let's see. However, so as I'm going over this, I'm still playing this in my mind. I might have to go Tim Tszyu. On paper, there should be no reason, and hear me out. On paper, there should be no reason why Tony Harrison doesn't make easy work of Tim Tszyu. But Tim Tszyu is undefeated. Tim Tszyu is coming in with a chip on his shoulder for two reasons. One, he couldn't get his hands on the champ. And two, he desperately wants to get out of the shadow of his father. And three, he's undefeated. He's never lost. Okay? It's hard to scare it's hard to scare him. It's hard to get him in a position where he thinks he's going to lose. He don't know what losing feels like. So that's a problem. Secondly, it's a problem if Tony Harrison gets on those ropes. And I can almost definitively tell you he will definitely end up on those ropes. Now, do I think Tony Harrison's chin can stand up to the power of Tim Tszyu? Even though Tim Tszyu's been fighting lesser competition, I still don't think he can stand up to Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu is a sharp puncher, and he's crisp. He's a very crisp puncher. He's not a sloppy guy. He's not going to throw a lot, but what he throws at you is going to be sharp and crisp, well-timed. And I got to tell you, if it's early, I'm definitely going with Tony Harrison, because I can see him walking Tim Tszyu into a lot of things if it's early, if it's round 5 and earlier. If it's after round 5, Tony Harrison's chances diminish greatly. He slows down in his pace. He slows down with his punch output. And he finds himself on the ropes more often than not after round 6. In which case, you are now in the realm of Tim Tszyu. Okay, all that stalking is going to pay off. All those body shots that he hit you with earlier is going to pay off. You naturally slow down on your own in later rounds. Imagine what's going to happen after he's placed some well-timed, well-landed body shots from round 3, 4, and 5, and now it's round 9. It's going to be a problem. I know I'm not giving the most definitive prediction, but if it's round 5 and above, I'm going with Tony Harrison that he could walk Tim Tszyu into something. If it's after round 5, without a shadow of a doubt, I'm definitely going with Tim Tszyu. And that's my prediction. I know it's not one person in particular, but I'm sorry, the way these two fight and the pace in which they're going to fight, I think certain things obviously benefit one fighter and other things greatly benefit another fighter. And I feel like this fight is largely based on the pace and largely based on the punch output. And another thing in the corner for Tim Tszyu, I don't feel like Tony Harrison is going to start off fast enough, and I don't feel like he's going to throw enough punches. So, like I said, anything 5 and above, I'm definitely going with Tony Harrison. Anything 6 and below, Tim Tszyu for a knockout. That's what I think. That is my prediction. As always, please like, please share, please subscribe to this channel.